Today is
empathy.
Empathy. We're going to talk about empathy today. What is empathy?
It's like
a big word.
Yeah.
Yeah. To help explain.
There's other things to explain empathy.
There's other ways to explain empathy.
Yeah.
There's other words we could use, synonyms.
Yeah.
Why don't you take these shoes?
Okay.
These are my shoes.
This?
Yeah, I'll hold that. Just walk around in those shoes for a little bit for me as I try to explain what empathy is. Empathy is basically understanding and sharing another person's feelings. You ever heard the saying, the idiom, to understand someone, you need to walk in their shoes? You ever heard that before? Meryl's doing that now. Let's see if it works. Come here, Meryl.
What?
Now, you've been walking in my shoes for a little bit. Do you feel like you understand me a little bit more? No? Do you feel like you can sympathize with my joys and my frustrations and my sorrows because you walked in my shoes? No, didn't really help. But maybe it's a metaphor. Maybe walking in somebody's shoes is a metaphor for being... Probably, right? Yeah.
Because that didn't work.
Because that didn't work the way we had it, no. It's about imagining yourself in that person's position. That's what they mean when they say walking in somebody's shoes. Imagining what that's like.
You can't actually walk in somebody's shoes and tell what they're feeling.
Exactly. She's absolutely right. It's understanding how others experience the world differently. Thinking about how a person must feel. Or to put it another way, Emmett, do you have a sign that you can show us here?
Yeah.
If you see somebody homeless or somebody who's down on their luck, you think, what if that was me? That's a good way to put it, right? Empathy is kind of understanding, what if that was me? So I've got a story that I want to show you that kind of is about empathy. It's about I'd say the most fundamental form of empathy from a mother. Parents understand empathy from the moment you were born. They really do. The moment you came out, they said, whatever pain this baby feels, I feel. Whenever this baby's hungry, I hurt for that baby because it's hungry. And it's just something instinctual that a lot of parents have, this feeling of empathy. So I've got a story about a mom. She's pretty young. She's not really mom, but she thinks she is. And her baby's not really baby. No, it's a dog. Watch this story.
A lot of kids go to the park to see ducks, but 8-year-old Kylie Brown of Freeport, Maine, takes her duck to see the park. As we first reported a few years ago, Snowflake goes into the pond and then returns when called, because Snowflake truly believes that Kylie is his mother, and the duck is not alone in this delusion.
I'm his mom.
You're not really his mom.
Yep, I'm his mom.
How did you first find out?
That he was a duck?
No, that... Kylie is unbearably cute. And since I never did recover to ask that question again, let me just tell you that Kylie first noticed Snowflake's attachment the day the Browns brought him home.
Look, he follows her.
For whatever reason, the duck imprinted on Kylie. It just had to be by her side, no matter what the hour. When Snowflake refused to stay in the backyard, Kylie's parents, Ashley and Mike, say they had no choice but to give him a diaper and make him a house duck.
He goes everywhere the ducks are allowed and almost everywhere they're not allowed. I don't know if you've ever had a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old that wouldn't leave home without its blankie.
Anxiety.
She would not leave home without her duck. And at that point, nothing's negotiable.
Snowflake goes to the beach in summer and sledding in winter. He's been to soccer practice, gone on sleepovers. He even went trick-or-treating as Olaf, the snowman from Frozen. And over time, because they both sincerely believe they belong together, Snowflake and Kylie have formed a bond like most of us will never know.
It's special that I know that that's the type of person that she's going to be.
Since we first told this story in 2016, Kylie has gotten even more motherly. She taught Snowflake how to read, or at least not eat the words.
Speak away.
She also taught him the value of community service, signing him up to be a therapy duck.
Yeah.
And, of course, she knows just what to do whenever her little one needs help, falling asleep. Kylie really is going to make a great mom someday, mostly because she always has been.
You know, someday he's going to grow up and go to college.
What?
Steve Hartman on the road in Freeport, Maine.
So there's a story about a mom who had a lot of empathy, right? She loved her duck. You have a duck you love too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to show you Meryl's duck. This is Meryl's favorite duck. And I can demonstrate how much Meryl loves this duck by showing what this duck looked like before.
He was so loved.
He was so loved that he went from this to this. And there was one day, probably one of the saddest days of your life, right?
Yeah.
When
probably.
the duck disappeared. And we lost the duck for a whole month. And
Which is 30 days.
She's right. It's 30 days.
I didn't have my duck for 30 days.
Yeah, as you can tell, it was a pretty dramatic thing. And we thought it was gone forever. We looked everywhere. We went, we'd taken it out to a restaurant, I think, that day, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't there. It wasn't at the restaurant. And it was just hard. It was hard. And then about a month later, you and I were cuddling on this pillow. Remember?
Yeah.
We're cuddling on this pillow.
And there's a pocket right here.
Yeah.
And I reached my hand in the pocket, and he was there.
He was there. Yeah. And it was joyful. It was really positively joyful. I once did a story on another little girl, and this is why I'm talking about the duck. Another little girl who lost her stuffed giraffe. And she was moving from Washington State to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And she lost her giraffe, her stuffed
and
giraffe.
I bet how sad that could be, because
You knew
if
how.
you got moved to another state without your lovey, how are you going to get through
Life.
that?
How are you going to get through life? And that's what she was going through. Well, about a month later, her parents found her little stuffed giraffe, and they put it in the refrigerator so that when she would open the refrigerator door and find her juice box that she wanted, she would see her giraffe there. And they had the camera rolling so they could capture that moment. And so she got her giraffe back, but she also discovered something equally remarkable. When she opened that door and saw her giraffe, first she's joyful, and then her face kind of went slack. And she said to her mom, "Why are my eyes watering?" She had discovered.
And if some of you know what happy tears are, that's what this is.
That's what we're leading to. Thank you, Meryl, for stealing my thunder. She had discovered one of the greatest joys, almost as great as love itself, and that is happy tears or overwhelming joy. Happy tears, the reason I bring up happy tears is because it's not just that little girl who had the happy tears that day. It was all the people who watched the story. Now, the people who watched the story had happy tears.
But how did they get happy tears? They don't have a lovey.
Right, they didn't lose their lovey and get it back. They had happy tears because they had empathy. They felt that little girl's joy. So watching it on TV, they felt her joy, they had empathy. And that's what we're talking about today. We're talking about empathy and feeling other people's feelings. Watching a situation and say, what if that was me? Right? Okay. I'm going to show you another story today. I'm going to show you 4 stories today. This one, there's a lot of different examples of empathy in this one story. This one happens in Olivet, Michigan. Watch this one.
Between classes, they schemed and conspired. For weeks, the football players here at Olivet Middle School in Olivet, Michigan, secretly planned their remarkable play.
Did anybody go, this is a crazy idea?
No, everyone was in on it. But like the coaches didn't know anything about it. So we were like going behind their back.
I've just never heard of a team coming up with a plan to not score.
It's just like to make someone's day, make someone's week, just make them happy.
The play, which was 2 plays actually, happened at a home game earlier this month. The first part of their plan was to try to get as close to the goal line as possible without scoring, even if it meant taking a dive on the 1-yard line, which it did. The crowd was not happy. Quarterback Parker Smith.
But us kids knew, hey, we got this. This is our time. This is Keith's time.
Oh.
Keith Orr is the little kid in the brown jacket. He's learning disabled, struggles with boundaries, but in the sweetest possible way. Because of his special nature, it's no surprise that Keith embraces his fellow football players.
Hug, Gabe.
What is surprising is how they have embraced him.
Hello.
We thought it'd be cool to do something for him because we really wanted to prove that he was part of our team and he meant a lot to us. Nothing can really explain getting a touchdown when you've never had one before.
Which brings us to part 2 of their play. If you didn't see Keith, it's because they were so protective of him. But he was in the middle of that rush.
And when you crossed the goal line, what was that like?
Awesome. It was like, did he just score a touchdown?
Get your camera out.
I'm like, oh, then I can't.
Keith's parents, Carrie and Jeff, almost missed the moment, but they got the significance.
Somebody's always going to have his back from now until the day he graduates.
She's right. When the football team decides you're cool, pretty much everyone follows suit. Today, Keith is a new kid, although by no means was he the only one who was profoundly changed.
What was it like for you?
It was like once I saw him go in, I was smiling about here.
Wide receiver Justice Miller.
Like nothing could wipe that smile off my face.
Why did it affect you so much?
Because he's never been cool or popular, and he went from being pretty much a nobody to making everyone's day.
Justice admits the play wasn't his idea.
I would have not really thought about that.
He says it never crossed his mind to give Keith any glory.
Well, I kind of went from being somebody mostly cared about myself and my friends to caring about everyone and trying to make everyone's day in everyone's life.
Which may just make that touchdown the most successful football play of all time. Steve Hartman on the road in Olivet, Michigan.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the characters in that story and ask the question, what if that was me? What would I have done? Let's start with Keith Orr. Keith wasn't the best football player, right? I can definitely empathize with him. I played a whole season of Little League and batted 0-0-0. That means every time I got to bat, I either struck out or didn't get on base. I played basketball and never scored a basket. One whole season, never scored a basket. So I can really empathize with him. When I see him and see those much bigger kids and he's on the team and really wanting to play, I could definitely empathize with him and what that must be like and how awesome it would be if somebody helped me score. I can also empathize with the boy at the end there, Justice. He didn't think of the play. He said he never really thought about helping Keith out in that way. And he almost wishes he would have, right? I can definitely empathize with him because there's been many times when I've seen other people do good things and wondered myself, why didn't I think of that? This is where kind of guilt comes in. And people sometimes think of guilt as a bad feeling. I think of guilt as a good feeling because it's a little trigger that sometimes goes off inside you. That little feeling like, oh, I wish I could have done better. I feel guilty. That's a little sign that you have empathy, that it's there, and it's just a little nudge, a little reminder to do better next time. So I think guilt is a good thing, and I loved Justice in that interview because I could so relate to him, and I saw his empathy evolve before my very eyes. I saw him become a better person right in front of me. He was crying. I was crying. My cameraman was crying. We did that interview in a library, and I looked over at the librarian, and she was crying because we all recognized what a powerful moment that was. Okay, let's look at another story. This is a story about two other guys who had some guilt as well. Let's watch the story And I'll ask you some questions about what you think, what you learned from this story. Let's watch it.
I came to Fort Worth, Texas, thinking I'd seen everything, when out rolled evidence to the contrary. A guy on a mower pulling 9 dogs on a train. That's a new one. In fact, the only thing more surprising than the sight may be the story behind it. This train ride is the brainchild of brothers Eugene and Walter Bostic, and it's just a small part of a much larger mission. The Bostics, who live in the same 11-acre woods they grew up in, spend thousands of dollars a year just feeding the wildlife here.
You name them. Coon, beaver, possum. No, we don't. Yeah, the beaver does eat corn and bread. Sure
yeah.
does. Mm-hmm. Quack, quack, quack. See, that's over there.
They don't miss so much as a mallard. And if you're wondering why they have this insatiable need to feed, the answer is simple. Childhood guilt.
When we first moved here, we killed them all. The rule of the day, anything that moved, we shot.
But now these repentant hunters are making amends in any way they can think of. Which brings us back to the train.
Come on, buddy, go train riding.
Over the years, a lot of stray dogs have wandered onto the property. Of course, they're cared for. But that wasn't enough for the Bostic boys, who thought these mutts might enjoy a little movement as well.
Well, we're probably ready. You don't be surprised how good it makes you feel when you see them loading up and how happy they are.
The train departs once a week for an hour of pure joy. The mangy misfits, now the envy of the neighborhood. The dogs no one wanted, now like celebrities on a catwalk. Their giant choo-choo toy takes the dogs mostly through the local warehouse district. But for the brothers, each trip takes them one step closer to redemption. They say all dogs go to heaven. And if that's true, there's gotta be room for those who engineer their happiness. Steve Hartman, on the road in Fort Worth, Texas.
Now, there was a story about 2 guys who had very little empathy for animals, right? And yet somehow, as they got older, maybe that little guilt switch clicked. Maybe that empathy was there all along and they just discovered it, but for whatever reason, they made up for it. And I think that's great. I'm so proud of them for discovering that so late in life. I think that's really great. Got a question that came in. The boys handed me this. It says, what have you learned by meeting so many different people across the country? Probably the biggest thing I've learned, and we'll talk about some of this tomorrow, is I learned that most people are good. I think sometimes we like to divide the country into the bad and the good. But it's really not a 50-50 kind of thing. It's more like a 99.9% to 1.1%, because most people in America are good. And I think that's probably what I've learned more than anything else. And also that what matters most to people, when you get down to it and you cut through everything else, that what matters most to people is faith and family. When you talk to them, I know there's a lot of other things that make the news, but it really comes down to faith and family more than anything else, I guess. Those are some things that I've learned from traveling on the road. Somebody's asking, what's the email again to get a hold of us? I'll mention this at the end too, but it's ontheroad@cbsnews.com. ontheroad@cbsnews.com. Okay, we've got time for one more story that I'm going to show you. This story illustrates, I'd say, what's possible when students, kids your age, a lot of kids with empathy, kind of team up and pool their empathy together to do something amazing. When they look at other classmates in their school, they're able to think, what if that was me? If they see somebody who's down on their luck or feeling lonely, what if that was me? And by walking in their shoes, they were really able to change the lives of many children. Let's watch this.
When the lunch bell rings at Boca High in Boca Raton, Florida, 3,400 kids spill into the courtyard and split into their social groups. But not everyone gets included. Here at Boca High and at schools across the country, someone always sits alone.
It's not a good feeling, like you're by yourself. And that's something I don't want anybody to go through.
Dennis Esteban is a Haitian immigrant. When he came here in first grade, he says he felt isolated, especially at lunch. Now he's a senior. He's popular, but he has not forgotten that first grade feeling.
To me, it's like if we don't try and go make that change, who's going to do it?
So with some friends, Dennis started a club called We Dine Together.
We dine. Together. We dine. Together. We dine. Together.
Their mission is to go into the courtyard at lunchtime to make sure no one is starving for company.
Dennis. You're new here? When did you first come here?
For new kids especially, the club is a godsend.
It's Gabriel.
Hey, how you doing? Since it started last fall, hundreds of friendships have formed. Some very unlikely.
You're probably meeting kids you never would meet on the football team.
Ever.
Jean Maxmaridou actually quit the football team, gave up all the perks that come with it, just so he could spend more time with this club.
I don't mind not getting a football scholarship. This is what I really want to do.
Just imagine how different your teenage years would have been.
What's your name?
If the coolest kids in school all of a sudden decided you mattered.
We get to know each other better.
It obviously takes a lot of empathy to devote your lunch period to this.
Yes.
Either that or firsthand experience.
I went from coming from a school that I always had friends to coming to where I had nobody. So.
Club member Allie Seeley transferred 2 years ago. She says with no one to sit next to, lunch can be the most excruciating part of the day.
This is really unfair. It's honestly an issue. Meeting someone who actually cares and listens to what you have to say really makes a difference. And that could happen at lunch. That could happen at our club. It's going to make a difference.
And not just here at Boca High.
Yeah, I'll be around tomorrow if you want to eat lunch together or something.
Dennis and his team are now trying to open chapters of We Dine Together at schools across the country. And maybe when they're done showing kids how to make outsiders feel accepted, they can teach us adults too. Steve Hartman on the road in Boca Raton, Florida.
And now I'm counting on you to lead the way in America, to show your empathy. Yesterday, we talked about your homework assignment. And that assignment was to think of the heroes that we have today, the people that we're really counting on, the doctors and the nurses. It could be anybody you think of, pizza delivery guy, garbage man, sanitation worker, somebody who works maybe at a pharmacy. Those people are still out there making us safe and keeping us going. And come up with some kind of thank you for them. Now, I gave you a couple choices. You could call them up on the phone.
Write them a letter.
You could write them a letter, exactly. I was thinking call on the phone because a lot of kids, they need practice talking on the phone because they'll maybe talk on the phone to grandparents, but it's good practice to call a stranger every once in a while. And can you imagine if you're somebody that is maybe a pharmacist and they get a phone call from a kid saying, I just want to thank you for being at work today. Imagine what that would mean to them. Yeah. If you do something like that, have your parents record it and send it to us. You could also write a letter. And if you write a letter, have your parents take a picture of you writing the letter and then send us a picture of the letter itself. And maybe we'll reach out to that person that you're writing the letter to, that you're writing the thank you to, and maybe we'll interview them for the evening news. Maybe.
And you.
Yeah, and you. Yeah, maybe we'll talk to the kid too. Somebody, like I said, some kids already turned their homework assignments, and this is one I love. A girl named Bailey did this morning. She wrote a thank you to her sanitation worker. She maintaining social distancing. She extended a rake with the thank you on there and gave it to him. And we have video of this that we'll show. I think we're going to show it on the evening news tonight, actually. So, Bailey, thank you so much for sending that in. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I think my story on the evening news on Friday will be some of these homework assignments. And if we're successful, kids all over America will be sending thank yous. And believe me, they're going to be very well received. And it's going to be a huge demonstration of kindness. Just a couple other announcements. If there's any teachers out there who use our stories regularly as part of their character education program, we have a little group that we have, and we'd like you to join. It's a Facebook group called On the Road for Educators. On the Road for Educators. That's only for teachers. But if you're a teacher who uses these, please join us. And lastly, I just want to thank the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell. This is happening because of Nora, and this is a passion of hers, and she believes in character education and kindness, and she gave us the go-ahead to do this. So I thank her. If you want to thank her, all you got to do is tune in and watch the CBS Evening News with her, and I'm sure she'd be very grateful. So tomorrow's class is going to be, do you remember what it is?
Friendship.
It's friendship, right? Tomorrow we're going to talk about friendship, and we're going to have 4 stories that just really embody great examples of friendship. So be sure and tune in then tomorrow at 2 o'clock Eastern. Until then, thanks so much for joining us. You guys have a great night.